This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 239 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is street art and murals. I am fairly confident that you have all encountered various kinds of murals or street art on your travels around the world, and probably they've brought you some joy. They've certainly brought me joy, and I find them really intriguing and, a nice surprise. Often turn a corner and there's some, incredible mural on the wall ahead of you. I always like that. In fact, I've been thinking about putting this episode together for quite a few months now because I chatted with our second guest today, Kayla, 4 or 5 months ago. And she is actually an artist who has actually created street art and murals, which you'll hear more about shortly. But that fascinated me so much that I wanted to hear more. So I have gathered some more stories to bring you this episode on street art and murals. And in the funny way that these things work, I was in the library a couple of weeks ago and just getting, normal travel books and novels. And I walked past the shelf where this other book essentially threw itself at me. And it's this huge book called The World Atlas of Street Art and Graffiti by Raphael Schachter. It's an Australian-produced book, actually, but it's just gorgeous. It's huge, and it's full of... They selected various street artists and graffiti artists from around the world. It's kind of organised by continent, as the atlas suggests, and includes also kind of biographies and backgrounds to the artists and their work. It's really fascinating and lots of pretty pictures. So I'll leave a link in the show notes to that in case you want to check it out. So I was thinking about my own experiences with street art, and I think the most memorable place for this was when my son and I went to Penang in Malaysia a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And in Penang, not long before that, it had become, a particular artist, I'm pretty sure he was Lithuanian, please correct me if I'm wrong, had been commissioned to do a series of really cool street art installations around the city, which we really enjoyed. We at first would just come across them by accident, but then started to seek them out and hunt them down so we could enjoy them. They're really fun ones. You've probably seen photographs of some of them. There's like a motorbike where the actual physical bike is kind of attached to the wall, and then the painting around it is if I'm right, a couple of kids that are sort of perched on the bike and things like that. But all sorts of gorgeous work. So I'm a big fan, as is our first guest today, which is Jenny Herbert. And Jenny told me about a recent experience she had with street art in her hometown of Melbourne, Australia.
Well, I went into the Melbourne Visitor Hub. I grew up in Melbourne and I thought I knew Melbourne, but I went into the Melbourne Visitor Hub and they had a whole collection of self-guided walks. So I could have done churches or bookshops or Indigenous Melbourne, but I chose street art. And so off I set with my map. I have to admit that I'd always walked past street art thinking it was defacing graffiti rather than anything of social value. And all of a sudden, because I had some guidance of what to look for and where to go, I began to see it in a completely different way. The walk actually took me down laneways of Melbourne that I didn't know existed.
Oh, wow.
And, past a sort of mercantile history of the town, of the city that I didn't know still existed. But the artwork just blew me away. It was such a range from the most amateur to the most accomplished. I was impressed by how legitimate the art form is. This is a way of people outside of convention expressing what they think is really important. And so it made me appreciate a whole different subculture of Melbourne through this art. Because it comes from a long tradition. It comes from a tradition of cave painting and the medieval graffiti in Salisbury Cathedral and it's always had a political and social basis to it. So these days, in a lot of ways, it's sort of commodified. There are knowledge street artists who travel around the world and are employed by councils and corporations to decorate unsightly surfaces. But what I saw was just a much more free-flowing expression. So much colour, so much talent. Also, it raises questions of what is legal and what is criminal, of what is what's creative and what's not.
Yeah.
What's public or private. There's all these other social considerations tied up with street art, which makes it very edgy. The other thing I think that makes it edgy is its transience. It might not even be there tomorrow, so you've got to see it today.
So true, yeah.
And, it can be a work that a group of young people have collaborated to make, or it can be just something of somebody's very personal expression of something that they might find disturbing or exciting or wonderful. And it can be right there in your face, or you might have to duck around corners to discover it. It's truly extraordinary. And so I just think the way it disrupts our notions of what is art and questions and explores our cultural identity, it makes it a very valuable part of our city lives.
I went on to tell Jenny, actually, in our chat about a street art tour I'd done in Perth, actually a guided tour. I was lucky enough to accompany my son's school class a couple of years ago on a guided tour of the street art of Perth, and it was fabulous. I discovered murals that I didn't even know were there, and to hear the stories behind them was fabulous. And to see a bunch of 25 9-year-old or 10-year-old kids who were absolutely fascinated by it was really, really lovely. We actually did then take them to the art gallery in the afternoon, and let's just say the engagement was not as high. To be fair, it was a 40-plus degree day. It was stinking hot and they were exhausted. So it was probably unfortunate that the art gallery came at the end of all of that. But definitely their interest and engagement in the street art was fabulous. And we often talk about that day because it was just, really fabulous. So, and it's exciting to see that you can discover those new things in your hometown often as well. Now, my next guest today is Kayla Wyszynski, and Kayla is the artist, and we talk a lot about all kinds of things related to her experiences of painting murals and other kinds of street art.
Well, I guess for me, it kind of started, I got my BFA in illustration at Kendall College of Art and Design in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my first major commission after college was a large mural welcoming visitors to my hometown of South Haven. So that kind of opened my eyes to public art and was a pretty incredible experience. So, which at first I didn't think that I would be doing that type of work, but then that kind of just spiraled, and so since then, I've kind of become a muralist of my town and have a lot of murals in my hometown.
That's amazing. How big was the first one, and what was it of?
So it was, again, they called it a Welcome to South Haven mural. So it was kind of a 3-paneled piece with the South Haven logo in the middle, and then I chose 2 landscape images of our beautiful surroundings, which we are a coastal town. People to come for the beach. We are right on Lake Michigan, and we have a beautiful lighthouse. So one of the images is of the marina with boats down the marina, and they always plant begonias along the bridge there, so those are in the foreground. And then on the other side, the other big thing in our small town is we hold in August every year a blueberry festival, which is really big. Cool. So there's a patch of blueberries and blueberry fields in the background. It was a longer mural, so it wasn't as tall. Mm-hmm. So for my first one, I just needed like a little mini scaffolding. So that was nice. because I hadn't at that point had like a bucket experience or a lift. So that was just, I just needed a little boost up. So.
Oh my goodness. So I assume now from what you say, you have also painted some taller, bigger murals.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about that.
So actually my first, because most of the murals I've done were more street level, so that I just needed a little boost, or I'd use some bigger scaffolding, but I hadn't been in a bucket before until I was in the mural festival in Jackson, Michigan, called Bright Walls. So I had that first experience that was a bit nerve-wracking, but you become quite comfortable once you get up there. But I had gone, and of course I'm painting with all these other artists that have painted huge murals, and so they are very comfortable, but there was a handful of artists that hadn't. So one of the guys kind of gave us a quick rundown of how to use it, but it was very brief and just kind of threw you in there, and it's like, figure it out. And so once you get up there, it was fine, but yeah. But now I'm very comfortable. I've had a couple experiences now where I've used a bucket lift, and once you're up there and you're up there all day, sun up to sundown, you get used to it. But
yeah, I
guess small, slow movements until you get comfortable.
I can imagine. Yes, I guess you're doing it for hours, and I suppose once you're painting, you're also quite focused, so you kind of can get past this is a weird place to be. Now, I'm so glad to talk to you, because I'm always astounded by how people can paint these enormous murals, because I'm completely non-artistic, and I'm so envious of people with those talents. But, when you are standing there painting it, you are very close, and yet you create something that's massive and it still looks incredible. So how does that work? What's the secret? Is it ever difficult to do that kind of enormous scale painting?
Sure. Yep, that's a really common question that a lot of artists, they use different tools to kind of manage the large scale-ness of it, which either you can use. A lot of artists project their image or their sketch. So at night, they'll project their image and then sketch it in with, I'll use a paint marker or a paintbrush or a pencil, so you can get a layout of your design on the wall. And other artists will use a grid system. So I've seen different ways that they can use grids, where one artist I saw, they had like just a cardboard square that they spray painted the squares as they went to build the grid, and they built their drawing up that way because they already had their design all gridded out. And then I've also seen there's a new thing called a squiggle grid, where instead of just boxes and squares, you do kind of a random design just of random letters and squiggles, and then you overlay your design. And supposedly with that method, there's more points of conversion with your design, so you have more reference points as you're doing it. So that's kind of the two different ways, or most common ways that I know, where you can do that. And obviously there's you need to step back a lot.
Yeah,
to see
that's what I imagine.
Kind of what you're doing. I definitely have to step back, because it's like when you're up close, things seem so defined, and then you step back and it's like, oh wow, you can't even really see what I just did there, or I really need to, up the contrast, or or really blend that over better from one direction to the other, or things like that. So
it's fascinating to me. I just think it's just incredible. Is it just my impression because it's happened around me, or is it true in general that street art is kind of massively exploding and there's more murals and everything in the world in the past 10 or so years? Is it just my imagination, or do you think it's true?
No, I think that's true too, but also maybe that's just my own circumstances.
True, maybe we're both biased.
My world has opened up to that, so now I see them everywhere, and I look for them more actively. But I do definitely think it's become more of a surge with the festivals, and that they have become more common because I see how awesome they can be for different communities, and how it brings all these different people together, just to kind of a public art celebration. So
yeah. Okay, I have one more kind of philosophical question. Why is public art important?
I think it is just Because how bland would the world be if there was no art, and I, one of the reasons I love public art is that it's really art for everyone. I mean, not just the ones that can afford it, and it brightens up spaces that are already there. So it's like, would you rather just have a boring brown wall or a beautiful piece of art that tells a story or inspires someone or just brightens their day? It can make a huge difference, just the little day-to-day experiences of people, passerbyers and things like that. Does that kind of answer the question?
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly right. That's kind of how, and like you say, it's public art for everyone. It's art that people can't avoid seeing. It's, other kinds of art you have to deliberately go into a gallery or something, but public art is just there as you walk by. So it makes it accessible to everyone, and even people who aren't interested will become entranced or interested. So cool.
So it really opens up conversation, I feel, and just brings other people together. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I had so many questions for Kayla, so thank you for indulging me, Kayla. And we also went on to talk more about the mural festival that she took part in, and it was equally fascinating. So in a future episode I've got coming up about festivals of all kinds, you'll hear my chat with Kayla about the mural festival. My final guest today is a Thoughtful Travellers listener, Facebook group member and regular listener, Anuj, and he's based in Melbourne, but has travelled all over the place. And he said he had a street art story to tell me, and he does. And it's a story I love hearing because it's one of those typical travel moments where you remember it not necessarily for the reason you went, but sometimes you remember travel days, particularly when something goes wrong. So here is Anuj's tale about visiting Rio in Brazil.
So we were in Rio in December 2016, and Rio has the largest street art mural created by a graffiti artist named Cobra. So this graffiti was created for the Olympics in 2016. So we went after that, and it spans almost 3 kilometers, and it's huge. Like, we will feel tiny in front of that.
Yeah.
So we hired on that day, we hired a guide with the car to take us around Rio, because you want to go to favelas and all these places with a guide, right? So the guide dropped us at this mural place, and he gave us 1 hour, 1 to 1.5 hours. That was near a port. So it is a very famous sort of place in Rio. So it is like it's not a city square, but it's sort of one of those places where a lot of activity happens.
Right. Okay.
So the mural is amazing. Like, the street art is so huge. There's a lot of faces. There's heaps of messages on it. It's just brilliant. Like it is exactly what you expect Rio to be.
Right.
So we were roaming around. My wife and I were roaming around, clicking few pictures. And then suddenly, after a little bit, we saw police cars come in, right? And I'm like, okay, there's police. It's fine. We are not breaking law. Then after a few minutes, maybe a little bit longer, military started coming with police. And then they stopped, and then they started to seal the area. So they started to build the temporary fencing and all that. And meanwhile, when I looked at it, my phone reception was gone.
Oh, no.
Because military was there. So we were right in the middle of the street art, and there was not a lot of public there on that day somehow. I don't know why, but not a lot of public. There's military and police. And they started to seal everything. And so we were like, okay, we will just wait it out, because how long can it be? Like, we have 1.5 hours, so 1 hour they'll be here. Must be some politician going past or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot. So we waited, and then they didn't move. Like, nothing, nobody moved anywhere. They were just waiting. They built a fence. They had all the shields up. They had everything. And my wife and I, we were like, what is going on? We were so scared.
Yeah, I bet.
Because we saw so many guns that day. It was not funny.
That is scary, because we're not used to that at all.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
we're not used to that. And absolutely terrified, but we have nowhere to go. So I had no phone reception. I cannot call the driver or even text him or anything like that. And all these automated weapons and military vehicles around us. It was a big shock. So we waited and waited and waited, and it was almost like sunset time. And I gathered some courage and tried to speak to police in Portuguese, which we know a little bit of Spanish, but
I was just going to ask, can you speak Portuguese?
Yeah. So with the phrase book, we started to figure out what we can ask. Luckily, we carried the phrase book.
Does the phrase book say, hey, why is the military closing this place? It's usually probably not in the phrase book, but...
It is not, but I can ask why, what time, all these things, right?
Right, yep.
So, but because it was so tense that we almost forgot everything that we learned about Spanish. And almost everything on the Facebook we can't even find. So it was like nearly sunset and we were in panic mode. And then to our surprise, just around maybe dusk, then they started to leave, like they were packing up and leaving. And
but nothing had actually happened, really.
Nothing happened. So this was the funniest part. So they came in, blocked everything, and then they left. So and then I could finally call my driver, and he was like, "Yeah, there was military presence. We don't know why. He didn't know why."
Oh, even he didn't know. Okay.
Yeah. So after we reached the hotel, we asked the reception, and the hotel said that there was some sort of a law passed in Brazil for some, government passed some law, which we don't, like, I can't remember what.
On that day, and then...
The day, a few days before, and there was a mass protest planned on that day. And that's why the military was there, because there must be a protest. Now, my driver didn't even know about it.
Right.
And the hotel knew about it, but... so the protest, luckily, didn't happen, or some miscommunication happened between the protest. So protest didn't happen, and military came in, and we were in the...
You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. and then I think the protest happened 2 days later. So we actually saw the protest from our hotel.
Oh, that's a good place to see a protest from, I think.
Yeah. And it was just a normal, peaceful protest.
Okay.
So I don't think it was any like crazy stuff. So we dodged a big bullet there. Like, it's good fun. Though. It's the story that we remember all the time.
I was going to say, you probably remember that mural much better than you would have if you'd just seen it in a normal, ordinary day. So, yeah.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, that's actually true. I mean, I do remember a couple of faces on the mural, like any day. So, because we were staring at them while we were waiting for the military.
So, classic tale of something goes wrong, but that makes it a memorable travel day. I love that. I could listen to those stories all day. I always find them fun. So, thank you so much for listening to episode 239 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I would love to hear your own stories and even see your own pictures of street art and murals you've seen on your travels. Don't forget to come along to the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers and share your thoughts there. You can find the Facebook group either by just searching for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook or clicking through the show notes. A few links and other bits of information that you'll also find in the show notes. I'm going to link to that book I was telling you about from the library, The World Atlas of Street Art and Graffiti. Also, Jenny Herbert is the author of The Art of Being a Tourist at Home, of which seeing local street art is a great example. So I'll leave a link to Jenny's book as well. Thanks also to Kayla Wyszynski, and you can see some of Kayla's actual murals and other artwork at her website, Kayski Creations. That's Kayski. So that's at kskicreations.com. I highly recommend it. Some of the artwork she described, some of the murals are actually on the homepage of her website there. So have a look. And also, of course, thanks so much to Anuj from the Thoughtful Travellers group for agreeing to have another chat. Always good to chat with listeners. I love it. So all of this information, links, etc. are at the show notes. And for today's episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/239. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.